Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I'm going live about now. Today is the stream I actually kind of hoped we would have because usually Sundays when we react to Mark Gurman's weekly Power On newsletter. But given that some stuff changed with how it's being monetized, I honestly wasn't sure if it was still coming out on Sunday, but apparently it is. But apparently, not every website is just rushing out to summarize it just as quickly as they used to. Not sure if other websites are doing the Mark thing and protesting the pricing of the Power On newsletter. No. Mark Gurman deserves it. That's not the point. But basically, I have to resort entirely to 9 to 5 Mac right now. And thank you so much for aggregating all that useful stuff. I hope my content is transformative, but usually at least try to use a few different sources. I know some other sources have now started, but while I was preparing the video, it was basically all coming in hot from 9 to 5 Mac. And yes, I'm not going to Bloomberg itself. And of course, if something, as always, which unfortunately happens quite a lot, drops right in the middle of a stream, then I'll try to respond to that. But let's hope we'll stick to what is already out there. Now, there are some interesting topics here, nothing game-changing, like nothing, oh my god, the iPhone 17 Pro design has now been officially confirmed by this and this source and stuff like that. But some smaller tidbits, some long-term rumors, which I usually like to cover just for my own sanity, just so years down the line I can say, oh yeah, we actually talked about this, or sometime in 2028 or so I will be able to say, you know what, wasn't like this thing supposed to happen by now, right? So it's a weird mix of like sort of expectation building and also wanting to hold leakers accountable, because much too often people just forget completely wrong predictions and leaks. Obviously this is a process that is always ongoing and years in the making. I haven't yet been streaming and creating content for long enough to actually have like my own track record sheet. I also know that I owe you guys still like a nice Excel sheet for like M4 chips and other processors that have launched this year. I'm inclined to say that will happen sometime through January, because right now I'm also preparing to go in a little bit of a small Christmas vacation. Please forgive me for that. We still have covered, of course, a lot of M4 stuff. We still have more M4 stuff to cover. For example, I do actually want to react to Linus Tech Tips review of the Mac Mini M4. And by the way, if any of you have been, of course, following how this channel interacts with LTT, you know, of course, that they have the Mac address is the YouTube channel, right? Their channel that was supposed to focus on Apple, but you see that the best content, the reviews and stuff like that, still kept coming out, unfortunately, directly on LTT, which meant they starved that channel for content. And now basically the main guy has been let go, has found something else for himself, and the channel is going on hiatus. So if you ever think that Linus is capable of managing Apple stuff really well, yeah, think again, unfortunately. And this goes back even to this channel years ago at this point, covering like making a video about like why LTT shouldn't make an Apple focused channel, predicting some of the same like problems that actually ended up happening. What's interesting to me is that after looking a little bit into like LTT's like employees, like a surprising amount actually uses Macs and iPhones and stuff like that. So I'm always surprised that the coverage, while I wouldn't say it's completely biased and completely negative, that wouldn't be true. But I would have expected more better, I honestly have to say. Like a more positive vibe, like where like there is a better focus on the end user experience, a little bit less focus on like, oh my god, the storage and RAM are so expensive. We know that by now. You can say that in the end in the recommendations. It's the same issue as with like the RTX 4090. We know it's ridiculously expensive. That's not why people are buying the RTX 4090, not because it's some great deal or something like that. But yeah, that's neither here nor there. That's not big news, of course. That came out actually a couple of days ago, and I did thought of maybe reacting to it in some previous stream, but alas, we had quite a lot of other stuff to talk about, and even today we obviously have some interesting stuff, as you can see. Before I get fully into it, as always, call out to do the YouTube jazz, as we call it around here. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it out to anybody who you think might enjoy it, and comment. I love interacting with the live comments, love getting your opinions, having small debates, whatever else you want to contribute in terms of suggestions, agreements, disagreements. It's all very much appreciated. Beyond that, you can support this channel directly with super chats and super stickers right whenever you catch me live. You can also become a channel member. Shout out to Angelica, Steve, and Max Maximus, who are all MarkTech Pro Max supporters right here on YouTube. And you can also become a supporter over on Patreon. However you want to engage with my content, it's all very much appreciated. Of course, you can also find me over on Twitter. I tried Blue Sky, tried Mastodon, all that stuff. Unfortunately, the people just don't come. The engagement doesn't come. So yeah, we'll see. At some point, we'll rid ourselves of that hellhole. But for now, go there, follow me. Maybe try to curate your feed so it shows more tech stuff rather than bullshit political and culture war stuff. But yeah, that's probably the best way to engage with me. But for now, let's actually start with the bad news first. Now, those are bad news in theory. I think in practice, those are news that basically most of us intuitively expected to play out this way. And that it has to do with Apple's plans for basically expanding their virtual reality, their augmented reality, their mixed reality hardware, right? So the basic question is, what comes after Vision Pro? And of course, we've talked about a Vision Pro 2 coming sometime next year, potentially, or early 2026, building on the M6 chip, further improving on whatever was like not fully baked yet in the original Vision Pro, using newer Wi-Fi standards, all that like very understandable upgrade path stuff. We've talked about the Vision Air that would be thinner or primarily more focused on lighter weight. It would be potentially a lot cheaper, but also more dependent on your iPhone. It's like it would be more of like an Apple Watch-like accessory where it's not entirely independent. But again, whatever of that actually ends up happening, and whatever ends up happening sooner, and what the exact prices will be, that remains to be seen. Now, there is, of course, the question with all that stuff that Meta is pushing out, and of course, Google just launching their Android XR platform. People are asking, does Apple plan to make actual smart glasses, augmented reality glasses, mixed reality glasses, however you want to call them? Or is Apple, for the moment, sort of stuck with like a virtual reality headset design more similar to what we now have with Vision Pro? Well, according to Mark Gurman from Bloomberg, not Mark Bloomberg from Gurman, is saying that Apple is around 3 to 5 years away from releasing a pair. They're still continuing development of some form of AR glasses. This is why, by the way, I sometimes argue with my audience or just the people I engage with on Twitter. Whenever people are saying, you know what, Apple is not working on this anymore. Apple has given up completely on this or that. And I'm like, guys, Apple might be a relatively small company internally for just how much money it generates. But Apple's efforts to constantly create new prototypes, to constantly experiment with new technology, new form factors, that is absolutely unchallenged. Not to say that nobody else is capable. I'm sure Samsung is trying a lot of different hardware, a lot of different form factors at any given moment. However, Apple is actually willing to push some of that, like, I don't know, to a face, I guess, where it's actually recognizably Apple, right? The way that I would say how Vision Pro has a very distinct identity, while whatever Samsung has shown off, which is like this Project Muhan, as part of the Android XR presentation, that just feels like a reactionary move to Apple Vision Pro being out, right? So while, yeah, Apple will never have as many individual products as Samsung, don't think that Apple isn't at any given moment trying to make as many at least different category of devices as a competitor like Samsung, as their Chinese competitors, as Xiaomi, Huawei, Vivo. All those companies become way more prolific. They enter new markets, they improve on older products. Apple cannot afford to stand still, and they aren't. They just still make sensible choices to not enter every single market out there, because it just would dilute their brand, it would dilute their development efforts, it would be incredibly hard to market everything simultaneously. There would be a ton of cannibalization back and forth between one product and the other, just from the sheer perspective that not every consumer can go out and buy that many products. Financially, just logistically, to how much they can fit into their pockets and on their wrists and on their heads, right? Also, just what they would want to wear. Not everyone wants to wear a watch. Not everybody wants to wear a headset. So this is why Apple is careful in trying to find out what would consumers actually react positively to. And right now, I would argue these 3 to 5 years that AR glasses are likely to still be away, also relates to that Vision Pro is a new category right now. Apple just released Vision OS 2. They're still refining the entire package. They're trying to find out what are consumers most responsive to. And I believe that their augmented reality glasses will only come out if they actually believe, you know what, we have refined Vision Pro, and now we actually have to decide, do we continue with like headset style designs, or do we maybe want to even completely shift to like a glasses like a form factor? So I'm not surprised here. However, if you are somebody who wanted to have like, what was it, like Snap goggles or like whatever bullshit Snapchat was doing, if you wanted a competitor to that from Apple, that ain't happening. And to be quite honest, I'm actually quite happy that this ain't happening, because I don't think that whatever Apple would produce here anytime soon would be up to Apple standards. I actually do believe that Vision Pro is one of Apple's most refined, most highest quality first gen products ever. If anybody remembers the first gen Apple Watch, I had one, the Apple Watch Series 0. That one could become abysmally slow. It had way less independence from the iPhone than what we have right now, to the point where actual apps had to be running off your iPhone, which drastically limited what developers could do with it. Of course, thicker, bulkier, all that stuff that then changed with Series 4, but also the original iPad, again, the A4 chip, as nice as it was for its time, the A5 just a year later was not only much more powerful, 2 times the CPU performance, 7 to 9 times the GPU performance, but also simultaneously efficient enough to actually reduce device thickness by like 30%. So Vision Pro, I actually don't think that Vision Pro 2 will be as drastically changed as, for example, the original iPad was towards the iPad 2. But again, I could be wrong. Maybe Apple could launch their AR glasses in a surprise way. I wouldn't bet on it. And now Mark Gurman seems to agree. So you basically get the Mark stamp of approval here from both Mark with K and Mark with C. Um, yeah, there's a lot that Apple would need to get right for such a product to work. They'd need to miniaturize a number of components. That's, of course, if Apple doesn't want to fully rely on iPhone dependence here, which I honestly think they probably would, given just how much smaller glasses are than their VR headset. Create a fashionable design that I think they'll manage. Provide battery life that make the product actually useful. Now, that's another question. You obviously wouldn't expect AR glasses to be connected to an external battery in the same way that Apple Vision Pro can be, primarily because Apple Vision Pro is primarily aimed towards home usage. This obviously would be aimed towards usage outdoors. So a lot to solve. Now, there is obviously some stuff to do, like high resolution displays inside glasses or more like projections, but good solutions get very expensive here. And Apple obviously cannot try to sell you a $2,000 pair of glasses that is super duper limited and in every way worse than Vision Pro. Yeah, they say they don't compromise too much on the media experience. Of course, some compromises would just be made by the nature of like glasses through which you're supposed to still see the environment and the fully closed off Vision Pro headset. So again, a lot of stuff to solve. If Apple ever believes it is solvable in a way that isn't so compromised that you might just use something else. And apparently, whatever their internal aims are, it's not happening until 3 to 4 years from now. So that's the bad news for today. Let's talk about some very medium news, at least in my opinion. It talks about AirTag 2, and similar to all news that we're discussing today, it does come from Bloomberg's Mark Gurman. We've had, obviously, AirTag on the market since 2021, so we are looking at a very sizable upgrade opportunity here, even though, of course, the nature of the product won't change too much. In fact, previous rumors have pointed towards Apple retaining this basic shape, which I guess makes sense. Like, there's an accessory market built around it, so you can attach it to like your keys and stuff like that. I know some people have expected, or at least hoped, that Apple would introduce something like a credit card-like design. We've seen solutions like that from their competitors. But quite honest, now that the Find My ecosystem is opened up, and it's opened up to the point that it actually can interact with devices for Google's, which I don't know what it's even called. Let's call it Google's Find My. Like, I don't actually think that we need Apple to provide every single design. I just think that we need Apple to make one definitive piece of tracking hardware, really focus on like reducing stalking risk and privacy, and to make privacy a real priority, and just keep on improving the base technology here. And according to Bloomberg's Mark Gurman, there will be a large upgrade to one key feature of the product, which is the precision finding, which, of course, there's the broader finding that you can do by it connecting through Bluetooth to devices that have GPS, or they're doing their location through Wi-Fi and something like that. And you get the general gist of where your AirTag is. But once you actually get relatively close to it, thanks to the use of ultra-wideband technology, you can actually locate it to basically centimeter precision, which is amazing. And actually, it has been like years in the making that everybody else adopts it too. But Apple, in that regard, has been very aggressive in pushing like their ultra wideband chips across a whole array of products, making AirTags with ultra wideband actually usable. Samsung, for example, for years has kept ultra wideband exclusive to only the Ultra Galaxy model. So yeah, actually there is like not only just a feature here that is being developed, but you know that you will actually be able to utilize it whether you have a pro iPhone or regular iPhone or an older model and something like that. That's very, very crucial to why AirTags are actually popular and why, in my opinion, they actually work as a category. So the main improvement here to precision finding is improving its range from 10 to 30 meters, which of course it depends if there are obstacles in the way, at which exact angle your positions and stuff like that. But this moves up to nearly triple the distance, or who knows, maybe even more than triple, but around triple, to 30 to 90 meters, which of course would hopefully also give you much better finding if there's like a wall between you and something like that, which ultra wideband, this is where its biggest weakness come in. It's not a strong as signal. It doesn't travel too far, but you can see it travels far enough. But yeah, the second you introduce any obstacles there, it can become problematic. This is why that dual use of like connecting to other devices that actually have GPS and stuff like that. So basically using Bluetooth for geolocation is very important together with that ultra wideband. Yeah, that definitely would be very interesting. We've, of course, heard rumor that Apple would keep further improving, like basically making the devices stalking proof. Right now, obviously, the devices have a speaker to alert you if an AirTag is traveling with you that isn't yours, right? That's cool and all, but some hackers have found workarounds where you literally drill a hole into the AirTag and disable the speaker. My assumption kind of is that Apple would work on a solution where the speaker is such an integral part of whatever motherboard you can say this device has, that the second the speaker is not functional anymore, that basically the AirTag stops working. It asks to be repaired. It informs you maybe through the Find My app, this AirTag is now a stalking risk. We apologize for you not being able to use it, but it's way too dangerous. So please dispose of it. Please recycle it. Please bring it to maybe Apple Repair. I doubt that they repair these things, but yeah. But obviously, just improving the base technology here, like ultra wideband, maybe switching to a newer generation of Bluetooth, making sure it's all very efficient, all very compatible with a wide array of newer products. That just makes sense. So plus it just creates new opportunities to market AirTags. It creates new opportunities to just put them back into like news and reviews. And if Apple can once again claim that they have the most secure and most privacy focused solution out there, that's obviously good PR. I know when AirTags originally came out, there was a lot of coverage of people using it for stalking and stuff like that, and police have complained about it potentially. But I think overall that negativity has largely died down over the years, and people just understand AirTags for what they actually are, which is a finding accessory with some privacy issues, because any accessory that does what it does would have those issues. But that Apple, thanks to their focus on these problems, actually minimizes them more than basically any other company. So I'm looking forward to it. I currently have 2 AirTags that I still haven't activated, so I probably wouldn't be just jumping on buying a new pair of 4 AirTags or whatever. But hey, maybe if they're like a slightly redesigned, maybe there are new color options or something like that, at that point I could potentially consider just maybe buying one and using it as my main key locator. Yeah, but definitely, this is also one of those things where I would tell you that if you are holding out for the next generation, usually this is the kind of accessory where you can buy the current generation without really worrying too much. they will still do basically the same thing. It's just that the newer one will be more convenient. However, that old one will be a lot cheaper right now. You probably can get it at like 30-40% discounts if you look at sites like Amazon and stuff like that. Yeah, so that is basically the medium news for today. So we went from bad to medium to a little bit more spicy stuff. Let's actually talk about something extremely positive that I think a lot of the Apple community will really appreciate before we get to something that is a tiny bit more nuanced and deserves a bit more detailed coverage from me. Well, the Apple Magic Mouse, of course, over the years has been the focus of very torn opinions. I think a lot of people who actually use it really like its focus on multi-touch, how smooth the scrolling with it is and stuff like that, the fact that you get basically the benefits of a mouse and the benefits of a trackpad with it. So it's not a bad product. But when you look down below here, you can already see its biggest flaw, which is that its charging port, which right now is USB-C, after years of lagging behind all of Apple's other ecosystem and staying on Lightning, we are finally now with the M4 generation being introduced to USB-C Magic accessories. But we, of course, got the same Magic Mouse in a way that just switched from Lightning to USB-C. The location of the port stayed the same, which obviously requires you to, whenever you want to charge your Apple Watch, you have to turn it around. You have to plug the cable a little bit more awkwardly. It will bounce a little bit on the table. Again, those are very much first world problems. Those are issues that I definitely don't feel too negatively about, but I feel kind of negatively enough about it to making my solution of choice, for example, the Logitech Master 3S. Yeah, it actually MX Master 3S for Mac, to be specifically. So yeah, it's not like I hate the Magic Mouse like others. I absolutely adore the Magic Trackpad, but obviously I see some of its downsides. Now, thanks to Bloomberg's Mark Gurman, I warned you, this is an episode basically sponsored by Mark Gurman in a way. Apple is working on a fully redesigned Magic Mouse, focusing on key criticism of the existing product. Apple just technically updated the Magic Mouse with a USB-C port. Yeah, true, that's not too much. But Gurman says Apple is aiming to devise something that better fits the modern era. Customers have long criticized the Magic Mouse's ergonomics. I do have to say, a lot of people criticizing the actual ergonomics of the Magic Mouse, I think, are doing it a disservice. You are not supposed to constantly hold it the way I would like my Logitech mouse. Like, it even has like a rest for like my thumb. That is not the key aspect of the Magic Mouse. With the Magic Mouse, you are way more supposed to focus on just like swiping on top of it. You're not supposed to be constantly cramping on top of it. And thank you, Angelica, for joining the chat, saying hello to everyone, saying she's joining us, and she is wishing us Merry Christmas. Well, there are episodes of Christmas celebrations that I don't partake in. I get confused to when is which one, but yeah, Merry Christmas to you all, I guess. So improvements would come to ergonomics. Some people say current Magic Mouse is uncomfortable for longer term use. Again, I know people who actually constantly use the Magic Mouse and don't have that issue. So it's a bit of a skill issue here, but I also understand that if Apple truly wants now, for example, with the Mac Mini being likely more popular than it has ever been, right? Apple wants customers to actually consider that Magic Mouse over solutions like that super popular MX Master 3S. And the Magic Mouse, in my opinion, it already does a few things rather well. It is probably the best multi-touch solution in the market, except for Apple's Magic Trackpad. It is decently precise. It obviously doesn't refresh as fast as like a gaming mouse. you probably don't need it to if you're using it primarily as like a Mac productivity mouse. It's small, it's compact, it obviously looks pretty sleek, but obviously if it has that meme status, right, you kind of at some point want to correct it. It's not that Apple couldn't live with it being a little bit memey, I guess, but I would kind of look at it similar to the Mac Studio versus the trash can Mac Pro, right? The trash can Mac Pro obviously was not a bad design. Now, it was a bad design at a time when Intel's chips just weren't getting more efficient, so that form factor legit was limiting to what kind of chip you could put inside it. But if you imagine like Apple Silicon being put into the trash can Mac Pro, you obviously know, oh, if it works in like the M4 Mac Mini, obviously even M4 Max, probably even M4 Ultra could work in that design. But that design also had a bit of meme status. I mean, there's a reason why I call it the trash can Mac Pro. So Apple designed a very simplified, basically like a 3 Mac Minis from the old design stacked on top of each other and made the Mac Studio. And that one was received more positively, partially for its new design, but of course that it came with Apple Silicon. So I think that if they redesign the Magic Mouse with better ergonomics in mind, also introduce new technologies for it, maybe give it like actual like gaming mouse like refresh rates and stuff like that, response times, then I think it could get a similar level of positive attention from the community. That's of course a lot of speculation. Those details unfortunately have not been provided too much by Bloomberg's Mark Gurman. Additionally, because of its design, there's no room for a charge port on the front, which again, a lot of people want that port right here that you can see on my Logitech. This episode has not been sponsored by Logitech, but if Logitech actually wants to, I'm actually quite a devout user of your accessories. So contact me, Logitech, I guess. So this, of course, means that you cannot use the mouse while charging. That's what I brought up. This is the problem, though, whenever you discuss the Magic Mouse. I feel like it's being hated on so much that you feel like you have to bring up like a list of not counters to what the people are saying, but you have to bring up a list of cons to the Magic Mouse. But they all basically come down to, oh, it's like not a click focused mouse, it's a multi-touch focused mouse, and that design technically isn't that ergonomic, but then again, that's more of a preference thing than rather a good versus bad thing. And then the really bad thing is always just the charging port, and previously you could at least bring up two things to the charging port, which is of course that it was poorly positioned and that it was lightning, and now it's poorly positioned, but it's at least USB-C. But you have to see that people are just trying to fill out text space here by bringing up negative points to the Magic Mouse, but it all comes down to, oh, the port is in the wrong position. There aren't many other details in the report. So again, people are bringing up the Logitech MX here, so you can see that the Apple community definitely has embraced third-party solutions, and I wouldn't be surprised that this is Apple's response. Now, whether or not it ends up with Apple making a mouse with like 5 to 6 buttons or something like that, and who knows, freaking RGB lights or whatever, and going entirely opposite to what the Magic Mouse is right now, whether or not it means that we could see like a Magic Mouse being this and then a Magic Mouse Pro being like a completely different thing or something like that. I mean, it all could happen, right? I don't think that this is the kind of thing where usually I tell you to like say, you know what, Apple is working on 3 or 4 prototypes at the same time, but obviously only one come to market. So don't buy too much into just one set of rumors. It could become a combination of them. But when it comes to individual accessories like these, they don't eat up so much development and design time that Apple couldn't even like last minute, like in a few weeks, well, certainly a few months, design like almost an entirely new mouse, and have like a wider array of mouses, because now the plural for keyboard mouse is not mice, out there. I mean, we know it happens. I mean, I think the best and kind of worst point of that is actually the Apple Pencil. Now, the Apple Pencil has suffered partially from just having a lot of releases over the years, right? And right now, Apple is obviously just focusing on two Apple Pencils, the Apple Pencil Pro and the Apple Pencil USB-C, which is the cheaper version. It has to be charged via cable and stuff like that. It's not the greatest thing ever. Obviously, it doesn't support wireless pairing and charging, which is a big deal to what makes the Apple Pencil very compelling. But at least it's cheaper, right? Well, Apple, that's just the two Apple Pencils that Apple right now brings up on their website. Of course, there was the Lightning-based Apple Pencil 1, and there was the Apple Pencil 2, which again, still depending on the product you might own, Apple Pencil 2 might actually be the best Apple Pencil you can buy for your specific iPad, because Apple Pencil 2 iPads don't actually support the Apple Pencil Pro, and the Apple Pencil Pro built iPads don't support Apple Pencil 2. So while I don't support, we'll get quite the same mess with the Magic Mouse, I wouldn't be surprised if we ended up with like the same $80 Magic Mouse as we've had before, being basically the cheaper alternative. Apple selling out of it as long as they have like inventory, and then producing maybe a few thousand units per quarter at best. And then like an $120 to $150 mouse that is actually relatively high-end, more competitive with alternative solutions. But again, I always say I do like to speculate on this channel. I do not try to impose on you my opinions and my predictions here, but that's what I could see happening. However, for now, this isn't really backed up by Mark Gurman. Supposedly, this is 12 to 18 months away, so expect it sometime in 2026. And this is why I'm saying that Apple could last minute cancel that new mouse, decide to make it a more expensive variant of the mouse we already have. And whatever details they're currently designing for it, those could be subject to change at basically every moment during the design phase. But thank you to Mark Gurman for giving us some hope here. I definitely wouldn't mind having an official Apple mouse that I enjoy. But until then, I'm very happy with the Master 3S that I own. And that is very crucial to actually running these streams, because otherwise I would just have to like scroll on my Magic trackpad, which isn't the best experience. Yeah, and that brings us to the last piece of bigger news that I wanted to discuss today. This is news, and well, it's rumors to be more precise. This is the rumors that I did allude to in the beginning, where I said I am using the coverage of these stories to also make sure that down the road I have at least a small understanding of which leaker predicted what and when and for when. And this is a rumor for 2028, so expect a lot of changes to that rumor, or at least a lot more details to come in. Maybe even cancellations, talks about delays. Obviously, nothing is delayed that wasn't officially announced, but then we would be talking about internal delays. So, yeah, this one has actually been brewing for a while. I do believe initial rumors were more about it being like a 2027 product. But seemingly it's now for 2028. We are talking about a foldable iPad basically a hybrid between an iPad and a MacBook in a way. Actually, pretty good render here from 9 to 5 Mac. There are some others there. It's basic. Now, I wouldn't expect it to have that notch here, but I would expect it to probably have bezels similar to what we already have from the iPad to just keep fighting like accidental touch inputs. But yeah, basically the final product once unfolded would obviously be more ambitious than any current existing iPad. Gurman describes this as something akin to a giant iPad that unfolds into the size of two iPad Pros side by side. Obviously, two iPad Pros, it depends whether we are talking about the 11-inch iPad Pro or the 13-inch iPad Pro, or maybe Apple could even have two versions of that foldable iPad. Yeah, but you can expect it somewhere in that range. Look at either iPad Pro that exists right now and basically put them together. So thank you to actually acknowledging that fact, which is that rumors about an Apple foldable have been off and on for years. But according to Bloomberg, Apple is finally zoning in on one product, one that will release in a few years. Now, this is where I actually put like the facepalm emoji in my thumbnail. And I honestly don't know if it's very fitting. But in my opinion, it's difficult to say because with the current limitations of foldable technologies, when it comes to durability, longevity, the visual impact of a crease and stuff like that, honestly, that product to me would be a full-on facepalm. There's also, of course, the question like, well, if you make a very expensive MacBook, at least you get like the power of a Pro or Max chip inside it. You get a really large battery because you don't have to care that much about size and weight. You get those nice speakers because you have that bottom space where you already have the keyboard, the trackpad, so you can use whatever space is left for very nice speakers and stuff like that. Obviously, it has a very clear design language. You open it up, it's usable. With a foldable, there are multiple questions, right? Would it have a front display? I doubt it. I think that would be a nightmare for durability and for cost. But right now, most foldables that we have, like the Galaxy Z Fold and the OnePlus Open and the Pixel 9 Pro Fold or whatever, right? They have that large internal screen and then a smaller external screen. But those are phones. They're designed to still be very quickly usable, while this would be more of like a laptop, which obviously you're expected to open up a laptop. So probably Apple wouldn't want to like waste internal space and cost on giving us yet another screen. But again, who knows? And until 2028, a lot obviously can change. The report also states that Apple wants to avoid creases on its device. So again, this is where a little bit of my thumbnail facepalm comes in, which is right now, after trying a lot of foldables. Now, I will acknowledge I have never owned a foldable. I've used one extensively for a few weeks. A friend lent it to me. But otherwise, my usage of foldables has been pretty much limited to trying it out in shops. And actually, I've done it quite extensively, at least as much as possible, going to certain shops every day and stuff like that, at least when they were more exciting. Like, I'll acknowledge Galaxy Fold 6, Galaxy Fold 5, less so, just not enough changes. But before that, I actually really try to create a comprehensive impression for myself on how distracting is the crease, what are the compromises between the external and the internal screen, how compromised are the cameras versus regular flagships. And obviously, when I had access to, I believe it was the Fold 3, or was it the Fold 4? Either one, not the Fold 5, not the Fold 6. That one, I actually got an impression of its battery life, of its like everyday performance, which actually wasn't bad. Obviously, next to the iPhone, it sucked, but that's a very different standard. Obviously, now foldables have actually caught up in other ways. It's just obvious in some ways. Samsung is now the procrastinator and the company doing least to push that category forward. But again, when we're talking about the Galaxy Z Fold, the Pixel 9 Pro Fold, OnePlus Open, all those devices, these are not real tablet sized devices. They're smartphone devices that fold up to become mini tablets that actually have less screen real estate than like an iPad mini. Here we are talking about an iPad Pro that expands into a screen substantially larger in a way than even what I would assume to be the 16-inch MacBook Pro. Part of that is the prediction is actually saying that when unfolded, the display will be around 20 inches or so. And it would have a single uninterrupted piece of glass. So whatever rumors you had before that those might be like basically two screens that very quickly connect to each other and give you one continuous image, that's not happening. Seemingly this is a foldable, but Apple is working here to avoid creases and actually make that transition seamless. Now, obviously, we have had durability issues. We had issues with creases and stuff like that on devices as small as the Galaxy Flip, which is obviously more of like a mini smartphone expanding into a Pro Max smartphone. We've had issues with durability and creases on folds, which obviously are like pro smartphones that unfold into mini tablets. Now we're talking about pro tablets unfolding into like almost like a mini external screen. So there's quite a lot here that could go wrong. Obviously, these devices, just with how yields of screens work, how cost just ramps up once you get failures at higher sizes and stuff like that, at bigger sizes and stuff like that. This device could have a lot of issues. So again, this is why we are talking about 2028 product that at some point in the rumor mill was more like a 2026, 2027 product. And seemingly this is now Apple's focus. Like while we do expect Apple to maybe produce some kind of foldable phone in 2027 or 2026 actually, now it seems, at least according here to Bloomberg Smart Gurman, their real focus when it comes to utilizing foldable technologies seems to be this iPad Mac hybrid. So currently the crease is near invisible, but Apple hasn't fully gotten rid of it. There are obviously some things beyond just the foldable display technology that you can do. Partially how you arrange your hinge makes a very important difference. So I assume that this is where a lot of work is going into right now. It says prototypes of this new product within Apple's industrial design groups have a nearly invisible crease. It's too early to tell if Apple can get rid of it altogether. Samsung Electronics Company, which launched its first foldable phone 5 years ago, obviously we're not talking about a phone here, has tried unsuccessfully to remove the crease. Should be noted that like the latest Galaxy Fold Special Edition? I always forget what stupid name they used for that Korea exclusive version. That one has less of a visible crease. And that passport design that we've seen from competitors has also been less prone to a very visible crease, but we're still talking obviously about the visible crease. So if Apple makes it near invisible, to me that would honestly be good enough. I understand that all technology has its compromises, but also part of that is when you imagine this design, right? it's not like that crease would actually really hurt you too much during usage. I mean, sure, if you fully unfold it, you want to watch a widescreen movie or TV show on it from here to there, right? I fully understand there would be a compromise here, even with a near quote unquote invisible crease. But if you actually use it as a laptop, or maybe if that screen also folds backwards, it's like a regular iPad Pro where you just use half of the screen, because obviously 20 inches would be a little bit hard to use unfolded. Um, then obviously the crease would be way less of an issue. Well, if you compare that to the Galaxy Z Fold, or especially the Flip, there's basically no way to ever avoid looking at the crease. So I honestly kind of understand why Apple for now is prioritizing this specific foldable design. So 20 inches or so in size, a higher end device with a single uninterrupted piece of glass. Higher end device. So my assumption at the very least would be that it uses a fully enabled base M chip. At that point, we're looking at like probably like the M7, M8. Given that Apple right now seems to be on an annual ride of actually like giving us a new M chip every year. Maybe, just maybe, there could be room for maybe like a Bint M Pro chip. That would probably depend on just how efficient those get. Maybe Apple could like downclock its multi-core performance while still giving you like a nice single-core performance. And obviously, by not giving you the full version, maybe they could say, you know what, power consumption is at least decent enough. But then that would depend on what battery you put inside. And it's not like I actually think this design would be limited too much in size, what battery you could put in, but weight and cost are the other two things. Like, would Apple literally just want to make it in some ways almost just like two iPad Pros stuck together, right? With extra speakers, extra screen real estate, extra everything, right? Or would it be more a little bit subdued, right? Would it more like just try to match the iPad Pro in every way, but still stay definitively below like the MacBook Pro with M Pro, M Max chips and active cooling and stuff like that? Obviously, even if Apple gives you quite good cooling here, that cooling would be constrained by the size. Obviously, this device would most likely not have active cooling. And obviously, you couldn't really like even dissipate the heat throughout like both the top and bottom, I guess you could say, because that's just not how heat transfer works. Like the hinge would be in the way. I don't know. Maybe Apple's engineers are that good and built like a vapor chamber going from here to here. But I just doubt that they would just deal with all of those design challenges, given just how challenging integrating that screen alone will be, and then making sure that it's usable from as many angles and positions as possible, given that that's kind of what the iPad is known for. Making sure that the Apple Pencil doesn't hurt that like plastic display, because currently, even with like ultra thin glass, technically the underlying screen is still plastic as far as I know. Maybe I'm getting it wrong. Feel free to correct me afterwards in the comment section. But yeah, it's a very interesting product with a lot of very different choices that Apple could make. So while with the current state of foldables, I am very much inclined to stand by my thumbnail doing that face palm, I also have to say, if Apple actually has technology in development that minimizes the crease and really makes this like a iPad that can play Mac apps, because now you can put them on one side of the screen, use the lower portion for like keyboard and multi-touch gestures, That obviously would be exciting to me. And Tipomaster joining the chat saying, I wonder if Apple has investigated things like the solid state laptop fan just shown on Dave 2D. I imagine they're at least in lab capacity. I wouldn't be surprised if Apple works on it, but it's still like the question how you work that in, right? Um, I'll actually, let me just briefly look it up. Dave 2D. The Impossible Laptop Fan. It's a 14-minute video. You know what? I'm actually gonna look into it right as we finish this up because we are almost an hour into it. So my usual reminder to do the YouTube jazz, liking the video, sharing it out, commenting, subscribing to the channel. If you want to support us directly, you can do so with super chats, super stickers, channel memberships, Patreon subscriptions, however you choose to engage with the content. It's all very much appreciated. But yeah, obviously the pricing here is a big question. I honestly don't think Apple has decided on any form of pricing here. Interestingly, Apple's foldable strategy seems to be focused on creating far larger screens you can carry around in your backpack rather than a suboptimal tablet experience. Yikes, that's a big shot against the folds that you can fit in your pocket. With Apple's reported foldable device, the company aims to have a single screen uninterrupted, unlike some larger foldables from PC makers such as Lenovo. True, there have been some attempts at this, but it's not complete. However, there's one interesting detail here. Now, this is speculation from Mark Gurman. So this is speculation in late 2024 for a product supposedly coming in 2028. So take that with a grain of salt. It's the same thing I tell you about my suspicions and my predictions. And Mark Gurman is saying, I don't believe it will be a true iPad Mac hybrid, but the device will have elements of both. By the time 2028 rolls around, iPadOS should be advanced enough to run macOS apps. So this is entirely devoid, obviously, of actual leaks and rumors that we've had any time, like any time recently. So I would assume that Mark Gurman would either have some sources to suggest that, or he's just talking out of his ass. To be quite honest, it does sound more like he's talking out of his ass, because the idea is, oh, can iPadOS run macOS apps? It's a stupid question because iPadOS can already run macOS apps just from the idea that they use very similar like base APIs and development frameworks. Of course, the iPad Pro, even the iPad Air have silicon that is the same as on the Macs, right? Technically, you could put Mac apps right onto that iPad environment and ecosystem we already have. Maybe not like the iPad mini, but basically everything else. And not the cheap iPad. Yes, that one is maybe too old and like in terms of its chip and has too little memory. But that obviously wouldn't apply here. So you can argue maybe Apple wouldn't allow you to put Mac OS like literally on just half of the screen, right? It would still be technically iPad OS. But in my understanding, at that point, it would be stupid for Apple to withhold the ability to just give it full site loading, full macOS apps abilities. Maybe it would happen in some kind of like special, almost like virtual machine environment. But at that point, in that regard, I actually agree with Mark Gurman's prediction that iPadOS would be advanced enough to handle it. Whether that means compatibility with every single Mac app, that would obviously depend on the stage of iPadOS development. Right now, obviously, for example, the streams I do on my Mac, I wouldn't be able to do them in the exact same way on my iPad due to limitations of iPadOS. So just some food for thought. It is unclear whether or not this is just speculation from Gurman. It kind of sounds like that, yeah. But the possibility of running Mac apps on this foldable iPad, forget it, another iPad still, bro, is quite exciting. As for foldable iPhones, the company is exploring the idea, though we might not see it until 2026. And to be honest, if Apple really focuses on this internally and they see like really big potential, and maybe they see like, oh, technology to make the crease basically like invisible will only be mass producible by 2028, I could see that foldable iPhone being delayed. There's also, just like from previous rumors, we talked about in the past how Apple initially planned on doing like a flip-like design, then currently is transitioning to more like a fold-like design on the iPad. What is to say that all of that won't be delayed to a point where Apple might consider an entirely new form factor, like a rollable device with basically you would have like a stick of a product and then a screen would roll out. Like, again, this is why I'm always trying to say, whenever you see like dates like 2028, this could become a 2029 or 2030 product. This could become entirely canceled. But it does seem, at least with all the rumors that are slowly coming together, that Apple has at least a vague understanding of how they want to utilize foldable technology. So if you're somebody who has always been really excited about foldables, there you go. I guess it's better than nothing. Let's actually look into what Tipomaster suggested. So I think that I'm not going to watch the LTT video because I'm slowly starting to develop a headache. But let's actually see what Dave 2D has to say about this supposedly impossible fan. I think LTT has covered a similar technology in the past. So let's see if that actually is what I expect it to be.
What if I told you that this device here, this tiny piece of metal with no moving parts, could produce an air current silently, and it's a strong enough current to cool a laptop? You would think it was impossible.
Okay, it wouldn't be entirely silent, but okay.
Right? You'd be like, this, it doesn't exist. There's no way. Okay, let me do a quick demonstration. So this technology is inside this little box here. It's right in this section here. I'm gonna lay down some smoke, and you will see it's crazy, and it's silent, like no sound. And the best part about this whole technology, I saw a fully functional laptop with this inside it. It was running off of this cooling technology, and this device was built by a very big company, very well-known company. They're going to be showcasing at CES in a couple weeks.
Oh,
so this
that's actually
technology
nice.
comes from a company called Ventiva. They've made a solid-state cooler that is unlike anything I've seen before. But to appreciate what's really going on here, we got to go back in time a little bit. 2 years ago, there was a product that made headlines. It was a product from a company called Frore, and they made
I think that's
AirJet.
what I remember.
And I chose not to cover their tech.
The
Let me
AirJet,
explain
yeah.
why. The AirJet used a technology that was like basically vibrating material. So they would take these piezoelectric membranes and they would flap them very quickly, 24,000 times a second. And when you vibrate them like that, you're able to create an air current. Now, the technology, very neat. And I did a demo with it. I was briefed on it. And I never made a video on it because there was one huge problem. That technology, at least at the time, was very energy inefficient. So just some numbers. A typical laptop fan, something like this. This uses 1 watt of energy to produce about 1.3 to maybe 1.5 CFM. Obviously, it varies based on design and whatever, but around that, right? 1.3 to 1.5 for 1 watt of energy. The Frore, the AirJet, used 1 watt of energy for 0.2 CFM. Very little airflow for that type of energy. So if you're using it for laptops...
Yeah, so by the way,
that was
this is
goal.
why, like, for example, Tipomaster, you ask, like, would Apple consider some of those technologies? Now, obviously, we are talking here about the newer tech. But whenever we covered, like, the AirJet in the past, I actually think I kind of was, like, wrong in my coverage in a way, which is I really didn't focus on the inefficiency. I know that a lot of people said, like, oh, it's suited for smartphones and tablets because 1 watt, yes, that is definitively a lot of power usage, especially for a smartphone. But if it can for relatively little airflow, but given that smartphones really don't have a realistic way to integrate fans at all, this is kind of a compromise you have to make, right? While for laptops, obviously you're much better off just improving the actual thermal mass inside, just using vapor chamber heat sinks, connecting all of the cooling mass better together, right? Rearranging the airflow in a more efficient way, then changing to a fan design that is 6 times less efficient in generating airflow. So let's see how this new technology actually
for that
stacks
type
up.
of energy. So if you're using it for laptops, I mean, that was the goal, right? That was the dream, to be able to use something like that. It just didn't make sense. And when I looked at the numbers, I'm like, there's no way this is ever going to be picked up by a laptop company.
Simple Master is saying, right, the main deal with this is solves for frozen efficiency, solid state benefits without using way more power. Yeah, let's see.
Anytime soon. And 2 years later, we still do not have any laptop companies that have touched it because energy efficiency. Also, there's issues with like
Yeah, I also think cost is also a difference here, which is like if you haven't, people always misunderstand whenever they're like, oh, you know what, this technology actually produces like only costs like $10 to make. It's only $2 more expensive than a traditional like $8 fan or whatever, right? That all sounds nice and good until you consider that $8 fan has been in production in some way, shape, or form for literally decades at this point. So it has a very, very established supply chain. It won't hit logistical issues. It won't fluctuate up and down in pricing somewhere down the road if suddenly demand spikes up and certain parts become short of supply. So there's a big opportunity cost here that like you can go for that new design and accept its compromises and everything, but now you've actually risked so much. Suddenly the cost for this tech spikes up and it actually now costs 3-4 times more than a traditional fan would be for a similar power level. You have a hard time now marketing it because your product is now not really better in any way. So yeah. And yeah, he'll bring up another issue when it comes to like having very complicated vibrations. For example, that piezoelectric effect that, for example, is used in ultra sound images, right? So yeah, there's definitely a lot of stuff to consider.
Vibrations and stuff when you're flapping things at that kind of rate. There is one product that uses it. It's a desktop with unlimited power because that plugs right up to the wall. But the whole idea of energy efficiency does not work well with that AirJet product. Okay, now, since that thing was announced, I've been approached by multiple companies saying they have, oh, we got some new solid state cooler. They've all been that type of tech. So I've kind of been jaded to this whole idea of a solid state cooled laptop.
Makes
2
sense.
weeks ago, I hear about this new product.
Dave is going a little bit gray here. Man, like having kids, the channel, everything, it's starting to wear a little.
Being demoed at CES that uses a different kind of technology. And apparently there was like a laptop being built with it. So I'm like, okay, let me see this. I go to the website, and it is, in fact, an entirely different method of cooling. It's actually solid state, there's no moving parts, and it works through the ionization of air molecules. So they have these harmonical looking things, they call them their ionic cooling engine, and inside each one of these, they have a wire.
By the way, if this shit launches, prepare for the next wave of freaking conspiracy theories, calling whatever it does is like ionizing radiation or whatever. I always forget how to properly put it in English. Sorry, my medical education was in German. Yeah, but yeah, obviously, basically, even like air filters for the home work like by creating ions and shit like that. So it's not like it's not bad, but if people were like afraid of 5G, you bet your ass they will be afraid of this.
And a grill, and these act as 2 electrodes. So when you run a high enough voltage through that wire, it ionizes the air around it. So it's stuff that we breathe, like oxygen, nitrogen, those are now ionized. They are missing an electron.
They're gonna
and now
explode.
those ionized molecules are very reactive. They're trying to replace that missing electron. So they're attracted to the negatively charged grill. So you got these ionized air molecules that jump over to that grill. And the act of that jumping...
It's almost like osmosis. Obviously, a very, very bad like comparison if you look at the details. But basically, you create one state of a particle on one side and one state of the particle on another side, and they try to find equilibrium so you can provoke movement between them. In fact, if you do that through a barrier, then it's diffusion. Or laptop makers pitch them as a double woo-woo benefit with positive ions. Yeah, you know what? It's gonna it has to be like marketed by Gwyneth Paltrow, and she has to make like a jade egg for your vagina based on this, and she's gonna say, you know what, this like laptop technology is so good for your health.
Creates a little bit of wind, but then you multiply it by billions and trillions of air molecules that are just doing this at the same time.
I'm actually
Now
now
you have
really interested in what the efficiency of that part is. One part of me that's actually really interested in what's the size efficiency here, right? Even beyond just the energy efficiency, I would love to know, like, let's say you have a fan designed, well, depending on to how much thermal mass it's connected to. But let's say you have a fan that's designed to dissipate 30 watts of heat. What do you do? Like, how much space do you save by going with this technology, and potentially how much more airflow could you do, especially now that airflow is much more silent because you don't have those moving parts. All you will hear is the actual air itself, not obviously the fan blades and stuff like that. I wonder, like, could you double down on the cooling capacity in a similar amount of space? Let's see.
some real airflow. It's a very crude representation of what's going on here, but that's essentially what it is. You have air molecules that are being ionized and then immediately deionized, and that process creates airflow.
And it's gonna
crazy,
explode.
but it works. So I'm looking through their press material. It all seems very impressive, and I reach out to them like, "Can you show this thing to me? Do you guys have like functional things that I can see?" And they come up and they show me a functional laptop. The company that built this, laptop, everyone knows this company. It's very
I will say it's either gonna be Dell or Lenovo. I don't know why. That's just my bad.
well-known company. You'll see it at CES. I wish I could show it to you, but it's not time yet. But the technology behind it was crazy. I was running Prime 95 and looking at hardware info, completely normal clock speeds. It's a powerful chip, and like there's no sound. There's no moving parts. It was wild. Like, think about it for a second. You were creating wind. You're creating airflow from nothing. It's like a piece of metal, and it's like there's wind.
To be honest, like when it comes to just shit we can do with electricity by itself, it will probably be the most defining aspect of like new technology. Just like non-movable parts and stuff like that. And it's kind of how with like the latest, like, you know, like robotics, we kind of moved away from a lot of hydraulic systems to purely electrical ones, because those are actually much more nimble, much more reactive, much more responsive, potentially actually more durable, especially for complex operations, while hydraulics are very good for like one task, very potentially like under a lot of pressure that you do again and again. So I think that when it comes to electronics, we'll actually move further and further into just like as few movable parts as possible. In fact, and even the stuff that is moving is like not moving because they're like actual like big moving parts. Some parts, for example, like for image stabilization, we have like magnets that basically adjust the sensor back and forth, right? That's not really a moving part in the traditional sense. So if you don't actually mess up the magnets in any way, it could keep moving in perpetuity. And similar to this, a fan at some point will break. That's just the nature of wear and tear. And while I'm sure the way this works will also at some point lose out on efficiency and it will become worthwhile in replacing it, but you can see like a more and more electrical, more digital world is definitely like happening in so many ways.
Coming out of it. It's crazy. It's
Yeah.
like so freaking crazy.
I love his excitement here. I do actually think that if there's space and energy efficiency here, then it could be a very worthwhile tech.
The more I talk about this, I'm like vocalizing my thoughts. I'm like, this is nuts. This is like, in my mind, this is like game-changing technology that fundamentally changes what laptops can and I think should be. And in addition to showing me that working laptop, they also demonstrated the airflow using a more elegant device than the one that I showed earlier. Now, keep in mind that using smoke machine like this is visually exaggerative because smoke particles follow fluid dynamics. Like when you look at that video, it might seem like it's hairdryer airflow. It's not. It's much more modest than that, but it's a lot more airflow than the AirJet and much more energy efficient at doing it. So like I said, a regular laptop fan moves around 1.5 CFM per watt. The AirJet from Frore, their product does 0.21 CFM per watt. Ventiva's Ionic Tech does around 1 CFM per watt. So it's not as energy efficient as a regular laptop fan, but it's essentially silent and it's small. So
which I guess, like, this is the kind of tech that would be really, really good for like a MacBook Air, to just bring it up to always sustain a certain level of performance. They say around 9 watts. This obviously is a bit weird because, as I said, the actual cooling capacity of what you actually transfer will depend a lot on like the amount of active cooling, the amount of cooling hardware attached. But let's say, like, I assume this data is like basically where everything is created equal. I think that noise reduction for a company like Apple, given how disgustingly efficient Apple Silicon is, I think that they could really eat up the difference. And don't forget, right, we are looking at even like a 30% reduction in efficiency here, right? Apple probably wouldn't want to like dissipate for like 80, 90 watts of heat here. So we are looking at still a very small absolute difference. Yes, percentage wise, if you just evaluate the fan versus it, plus whatever you lose in battery, especially in the 14-inch MacBook Pro that isn't actually like limited in battery capacity like the 16 inches, right? If this solution is actually volumetrically a lot smaller, well, you can give it a larger battery. It doesn't even have to be something crazy. You could go from 72 watt hours to something like 75 or 77. And that absolutely could work. Or you just double down on like the cooling material that you put in, right? You just double down on the amount of aluminum. I don't think Apple would ever double down on the amount of copper just for cost savings, right? And suddenly with that same fan, you can actually do a lot more because heat soaking on the device happens a lot slower because you have a lot more thermal mass.
As energy efficient as a regular laptop fan, but it's essentially silent and it's small. So this is the size of a typical laptop fan, and the larger you go, the quieter you can run it. But the reason why size is so important when it comes to fans and stuff is that these things dictate how you design laptops. Like, because these
not even laptops. For example, I would be much more excited about something like this on a tablet. And you could even like because of how efficient tablets are designed in general, you could even make it like a performance mode, or it just automates out, it just turns on automatically based on certain apps and stuff like that, right? Your regular system could still like say, you know what, that fan is not super highly efficient. Let us just run the chip at maybe like 90% of its performance peak, gonna be fine. Obviously, most of your regular OS usage will be far below that threshold. But whenever we go be above that 90%, whenever we want to give you maximum performance and even more important, sustained performance, that's where we're gonna put in that fan.
to be in there to cool them for most laptops. You have to take that into consideration when you figure out like how big of a battery is it, how big is the whole product. Like the whole thing revolves around thermal design, right? And that's how big they often are. Now, the Frore AirJet was quite a bit smaller, and because it was so small, I think that's why it was so exciting to a lot of people, because it's like, if you can shrink it down to this size, that changes things.
They also, by the way, really had an emphasis on how thin it is, which largely, when it comes to smartphones, I would argue the reason why we don't really put in fans in there, except for, of course, water and dust resistance and things like that, is not really even the X and Y like dimensions of the fan, but it's the Z, right? It's the thickness of it. Like, at what point would it just make more sense to attach an external cooler with potentially a lot more cooling capacity? It just would not be directly cooling the chip, but rather the chassis. But that accessory could also have like extra buttons for gaming. It could have an extra battery, could have extra camera lenses, right? Rather than putting in one fan forever into your phone, forever compromising its water and dust resistance, forever making it thicker and heavier, forever making it less durable, right? And on a laptop where you really don't really have a choice, especially once you're looking at like M4 Pro and above chips, you really don't have a choice but to put in a fan. Now, this is where we are asking, well, what kind of airflow solution can we put in here?
Problems. Now, the tech from Ventiva is different. They can make them in custom lengths and stuff, but these little metal components are not enough. You need a couple other things.
Yeah.
First, you need some kind of housing. Like in this example here, this is actually
This looks almost like an NVMe drive.
housing the middle-sized one that you saw previously, and this was the thing that was inside the machine that I showed you earlier. But this little housing serves two purposes. One, it serves to kind of direct the airflow as it generates it, but also it acts as like a kind of a small Faraday cage, because that electrode wire generates an electromagnetic field that you can contain using a Faraday cage type product like this. But in addition to the housing, you also need to have a power supply. So in order to operate this thing, you need to generate a high enough voltage, very low current.
Yeah, but I guess your like whatever motherboard you have, whatever battery you already have in the laptop is good enough to power this.
But a high voltage to be able to create the ionization capabilities of that wire. And this is it here. Now this is an older, I guess, older generation.
So how much smaller is this, what you guys say? Would you say it's half volumetrically what the fan is?
This thing, they're actively shrinking down more and more, and supposedly have several in development that are significantly smaller than this, but each one of these power supplies can
interestingly enough, when you just look at the fan, like the literal fan that he showed here, right? No, there, right? The fan here is actually pretty small. It's where you have to create a little bit of a chassis to direct its airflow, right? So you don't just want it to like blow air all over internally your chassis. You want to actually direct it outside. So in that regard, while it's actually not smaller than the fan itself, once you account for like the fan chassis, yeah, I would say it's about half the size, maybe less.
But in addition to the housing, you also need to have very low. And this is it here. Now this is an older, I guess, older generation of this thing. They're actively shrinking down more and more, and supposedly have several in development that are significantly smaller than this. But
okay, so right now it would need to have a solution that, okay, yeah, wow, that's a bit problematic. So you're basically saying it would have to have its own like kind of specific power supply, because whatever current it needs is very, very specific. Now, I would expect, and Tipo Master, this is one thing where I would probably curb down your enthusiasm a little bit while actually also providing hopefully some valuable details. When you actually look, for example, in the Mac Mini, Mac Mini M4 power supply. It's an aesthetically pleasing power supply. You can see, by the way, that Apple to actually invest a lot in making their power supplies very space efficient. On a product like the Mac Mini, that means actually using the X and Y axis, but not making it very thick, because obviously you don't, like the broader you space it out, the better you can redirect the airflow over all the components, right? And you just take up less space overall in that internal design. My expectation is that if Apple ever introduces something like that, they would want that like the power supply for that fan, I guess, to be integrated into their existing power supplies, into their existing motherboards, batteries, whatever. I just don't see them putting extra components that take up extra space, potentially generate some extra heat. But yeah, it's just interesting to consider. It's nice to have a personal Scorpio enthusiasm, yeah, but I think like the power delivery and fans just gets built into motherboards and PSUs that will be baked into those designs too. Well, seemingly the first gen not. That's actually not too uncommon for a lot of, for example, medical grade equipment, right? You like, yeah, you plug in into the socket, obviously, but there are crazy amounts of like power converters, power supplies there that really adjust the current for it. For example, when you look at MRIs and things like that, those things don't just need a lot of power, but they need that power to be delivered in a very specific way. So it seems like that is currently what's happening. Not sure if there's any way to just connect it to any regular socket, but I mean, would he really show it that way if it didn't rely on it? I mean, granted, there is no other power supply here, but I don't think the company would like mention that it needs special hardware. And once you combine those two actually together, now you're looking at something actually larger than the fan and probably more expensive. So the main benefit here would actually be and less efficient, unfortunately. So you are kind of looking into something that only quote unquote reduces noise, which given the product, for example, for audio, professional audio equipment, reducing the noise level is basically 90% of what you want, right? Then 10% is real performance. So yeah, I can actually see the real idea here. But yeah, let's see if maybe on the final laptops it would be integrated. But for now, obviously, I couldn't tell you. The PSU here is just a tech demonstrator to make it work. True, but if he is saying it needs a very special current and voltage,
Each one of these power supplies can operate several of those harmonica-looking things. These
okay. So my expectation then is like, if you're using a laptop that might only have one of those, you would really like have a much smaller thing here. Okay, so that's already very encouraging.
We call them ionic cooling engines. And I think this one in particular can do 3, but they have other ones that can do more, like 5 and 6, whatever. But the idea is that you need one of these for several of these cooling things that you can place around the laptop. But as you shrink that, the whole thermal solution becomes smaller and smaller. And even in its current state, like this like older generation what I have in front of me right here, this is already smaller than most fans. Now there are 3 kind of obstacles that I think this product has right now. So the first one is the cost. So a typical laptop fan is so cheap. Like these are $1 to $3 or $4. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
when I said $8, I really meant a very nice fan.
Single-digit dollars. So even the most custom solutions out there with like finely tuned fins and stuff, like these are very inexpensive. A new solution like this, like out of the gate with low volume, I wouldn't be surprised if this is like an extra $40 or $50.
Yeah, unfortunately,
for the manufacturers. It's a lot more.
And you have to figure out, right, when it comes to what specifically you're using it in. For now, for example, Apple Silicon is so efficient, right? Even if, for example, we can argue, well, does the base M4 MacBook Pro with its only one fan, does it give you like its full performance, the absolute full performance you could get out of it for CPU and GPU simultaneously? No, but you probably only throttle it by like 3 to 5%. Which also makes it, by the way, like 10-15% more efficient. And you still get great sustained performance, right? And you already have the solution. Not only do you have the already very inexpensive fan, but you already have the guaranteed supply. So this is the kind of tech that I could see Apple using. Actually, I could see, but 3 to 4 years down the line. Imagine if on the MacBook Pro it had 3 of those instead of 2 fans, while also being under half to 1/3 the length and moving the board up and expanding the battery, or more likely being smaller. True, for example, that 2026 redesign that Apple is targeting for the MacBook Pro, right? I mean, we talked about power supplies. I mean, here's the fan basically for the Mac Mini, but actually look at the fans in the MacBook Pro. I hope. I hope it knows what I'm looking at. Yeah. Here. Look, that's. I'm not gonna say it's 1/3 of the product because obviously it's not quite that, but it's about a quarter, right? Even if you reduce it by half to give you still the same amount of like flow, airflow, that's a huge opportunity. Plus, potentially you could also make it maybe even like much more focused on the actual chip, right? So instead of having to obviously build like those heat pipes that transfer the heat towards like some aluminum cooling here, and then having the fans blow through it, you could actually just like you could have those things across the entire back here, but you could also then just use all this external space for something else, for making the device thinner, for making the battery larger, and even then battery also in the next couple of years we're probably looking at higher density batteries like silicon carbon. So by 2026, combining technology like tandem OLED, 16 angstrom TSMC designs with backside power delivery, silicon carbon batteries, that brand new airflow generator and stuff like that. There's a lot. Even if Apple just uses half of it, that already could allow for a very substantial redesign of the product without actually compromising on essentials like thermals and battery life.
Fans. So I feel like when that pricing trickles down to consumers, it's going to be a decent step up. Just this is like based on very little laptop engineering knowledge, but that's just my thinking. But the other thing is ozone. So when you ionize air, especially with oxygen molecules in our atmosphere,
it smells like ozone, which obviously a lot of people like. They get like ozone makers for the home. I don't. I have a real air filter, which uses like a real filter membrane inside. I don't actually. I think it's a HEPA filter. Yeah, like active coal filter would make sense in that design. But that's what actually cleans air. That just makes the air ionized.
You have the potential to create ozone, like O3. Now, I spoke to them about this because right when they demoed this, I was like, wait, you're ionizing air? Isn't there O3? And so they have a solution. They say that they're using manganese dioxide as a catalyst on the copper or like I guess on the heatsink or the fin area, and it just acts as a catalyst to facilitate the conversion of that ozone back to oxygen immediately. Now, they've supposedly done
so that would almost like with a regular filter on top of like a fan design, which Apple, for example, has been criticized in the past for not putting air filters. Right? You limit the airflow on purpose so you don't clog up your system with like dust and dirt from the outside. So here you're actually almost working in reverse. You have this sort of ozone filter that obviously transfers O3 back to O2. Because you don't want the O3 to escape. Very interesting compromises here. The future we imagine flying electric cars, the future we got catalytic converters on laptops. In a way, yeah. Let's just really hope those catalytic converters actually work.
With like UL standards and
or we're gonna have like another Volkswagen Dieselgate on our hands, right? If that thing actually ends up having O3 escape. And by the way, this is also where certain design decisions have to come in, because, for example, if you make this like an industrial like laptop, you know, like those laptops like people use on like next to like building spaceships and whatever, right? Those thick, heavy boys that are water and dust resistant and shit like that. I don't imagine you would ever use something like that there, because for one, those devices are already built for relatively low heat generation. Also, they're thick. also you just want to reduce cost because they're already pretty expensive. So why not just put in a cheap fan? But also, if a device then, like, let's get say moved around a lot, right? It gets hit in places and stuff like that. Maybe some damage happens to that catalytic converter. Again, it's not like ozone is damaging, but you really don't want to clog up your apartment with O3. So my question is, would Apple again see some kind of problem with this design until they really make sure that that catalytic converter, for one, works forever, basically, which again for Apple is actually really important. They market their devices as having really nice longevity these days, nice recyclability and stuff like that. So and they're very safe, they're very environmentally friendly. So would be very interesting to see if Apple sees an issue with any of that.
It's all good, up on the up and up. And now that I'm saying this out loud, I do think that in order for that company to have picked this thing up and make a laptop with this, it probably passed all the certification.
It depends a little bit on the specification. There's an issue with like when it comes to something really brand new that we don't fully understand, unless it's like a very explicit like new form of radiation that God forbid shouldn't come into households or whatever. But think even back, like I don't remember it. I wasn't alive. But think back to how carelessly people were integrating microwaves into their lives, right? Relatively cheap solutions with almost no shielding and shit like that. So don't ever trust big companies to just say, you know what, we ran our test. Yeah, you ran tests that existed prior. Like, for example, if you subject a microwave to the test that you previously had for a regular heat oven, right? Then it's all fine. You like, oh, it doesn't generate that much heat. It doesn't need too much cooling. Doesn't need too much airflow, right? Oh, but it uses a completely different form of radiation to achieve that effect. So it needs actually very different tests. So this is what I'm trying to say. The fact that Dell or Lenovo or HP might currently be happy with this for something they might want to show at CES, which doesn't necessarily mean that it will make it to market, that's not a guarantee of complete safety.
But it's just a thought that I had. And I also did ask them like dust and all that stuff. And they apparently have solutions for all these things. It's just all under patents. They didn't.
Yeah, it's also going to make it all very expensive.
A lot of that is solved. But the third, and I think the biggest obstacle with this, it comes down to static pressure. So static pressure is, I guess it's the ability for a fan to continue pushing air even if there's resistance. So a typical laptop fan, these things have like, I'd say like 40 to maybe 50 pascals of static pressure. So that's like the higher the better, because that means that you can push the air through a lot of heat like fins. You can suck air through a lot of like tiny holes. This is okay. The Furore AirJet product, one of its main strengths was very high static pressure. I think that was like 1700.
That was also, I believe, partially why it was actually pretty loud, because it actually pushed a lot of air through a relatively small surface area.
Suck air from really far away, not particularly energy efficiently, but it could do it. This product here, the Ventiva, has a static pressure rating of 12. So significantly lower than like the 40 or 50 of a laptop fan. And because of that, there's one limitation to this. One big limitation to this. So
well, that would change it at what heights you can use it. That's one. But what would be the main thing for us, like regular people living in like America and Europe?
Demo unit earlier, the air intake holes are really close to the ionic cooling engine itself. And they've done that just to minimize the amount of resistance that the air is going to get to be able to flow in through that device and out. And the reason why this whole idea of like static pressure is an issue is that when it comes to the typical laptop design right now, like this is an Asus product. So the question
is how it would generate that pressure?
This is air intake. And it sucks air in through here and then out the back of the device, the exhaust. But this like main intake grill area is not the only area that air flows through this system. Like obviously the main intake is here, but even like the device itself, when you pop it open, there are little gaps all across the keyboard, and airflow goes to the keyboard. And even up top, there's like a, this is stylistically designed, but there's air that's going through these little grills that get exhausted out the back. But the reason why this device is able to
He's showing an Asus laptop. I wonder if that is a hint at which company is making it, which I know I bet like a Lenovo or a Dell, but I guess it could be also Asus.
suck air from all those little tiny holes is because the static pressure of those two fans is reasonably high. Now, there are even devices out there, like laptops, where they'll actually seal off the intake here because they want air to flow in a very particular way through like other sources. And that's just the way that laptops are designed.
There's also you want to avoid the noise of having unregulated air, basically. It just sometimes makes more sense to just blast air through one very defined path through the device rather than having like 20 different potential intakes for it. I immediately thought Asus when he was talking about the mystery company for some reason. Well, let's see who'll turn out to be correct.
Across multiple components before it gets exhausted. But because the static pressure of this device is so low, you lose that capability. You don't have the ability to like suck air from really far, small holes all across the laptop before it goes in through the ionic mechanism. And because of that, I think that if you just build a laptop
So my assumption is, from all the compromises that we've seen thus far, from the pricing considerations that obviously impacted, like for one, I don't think and from the limited availability in terms of like what exact heat dissipation you could have. So my assumption is this would be SoC focused. So it would be like a Ryzen AI chip, like one of their SoCs. I don't know if it would be like a Strix Halo chip, because that would have pretty high power consumption. You also probably wouldn't want to bog it down with a piece of hardware inside that we don't know the availability of, and you don't want to add cost to it at a time when like Nvidia will soon launch their Nvidia Mobile 5000 GPU. So my assumption is this could be for like Lunar Lake systems and like Strix Point, because the power consumption is low enough so that you could use the smaller ones. Those devices still need decently sized fans, so replacing it with this solution doesn't actually take up more space, nor would it be fundamentally limited, like trying to cool a dedicated GPU with it. That would be about plus both Strix Point and Lunar Lake are kind of expensive enough, so you could put in like an extra $30-40 worth of hardware inside without fundamentally like breaking the bank on the final product. I wonder if this does take off, if it could lead to redesigns of laptop cooling as a whole, like having two active intake, for example, which normally is just byproduct of fan exhaust. I assume that the final products are probably even like, and I don't mean the first gen product that we're gonna see, but I mean if this takes off and we have like 4 or 5 years of continuous development on it, I actually wouldn't be surprised if the end design of the cooling, not even the laptop itself, is so drastically different from what we are used to that as a non-expert, we basically cannot predict it, right? I mean, technically, you could still generate that pressure like with far further away exhausts or intakes by having like a pipe, right? So that pressure doesn't get lost throughout the chassis just by having those holes close by. But that is obviously more expensive hardware. But then again, you could use that to already cool the air as it goes through the product. And if you really build the product entirely around this, and you probably don't want to put in like 5 of these or something like that, you probably just wanted to have like 3, maybe 4 exhaust vents with it, and you want to attach a decent amount of cooling to it, and then you just find some other way to direct cooling to it. Now, this is actually a problem because on a MacBook, going back to the website, right, that you can see where does the cool air actually come from. Well, it comes from further at the front of the product, right? And then it gets sucked into it, gets blown through the fan and blown through the cooling arrangement. So in the back, and then a little bit on top too. um, but this is the current airflow design of the MacBook Pro. So this would not work at all with it unless they didn't let the air just move freely through the chassis, but they made like air pipes from those intakes to like the actual like whatever that product is called. Or you would have to find ways to entirely redesign where air comes in, where how it goes out. Even if you put those intakes here, that would still be questionable with the low amount of static pressure that it can build up. So again, very interesting engineering problems here to solve.
This technology, with no change to the components and where things are placed, you lose a lot of the efficiency. In order to take real advantage of this, you need to just redesign a laptop completely with components moved into different areas so that you don't need to rely on strong static pressure to be able to just make proper use of this type of cooling technology. And I think that's why a lot of their press material shows coolers on different edges of the laptop. But I look at this tech and I'm just super excited to see what other companies do with this technology.
And again, this is one specific company integrating it, where you have like almost, you can see they have like space for those like three devices, like three cooling devices. But imagine if you actually almost divided it to like 10 super small ones, right? And you could even dynamically turn those on and off depending on which part generates heat. Maybe you even blow some heat around the corner, right? Oh, which I guess that is partially, like, I guess that's like a space for it too, right? So they probably have considered it. So you might have your chip very far to the left and back side, right? And then around it, if it's just like a 15 to 30 watt chip, you just have two of those. One to the left and then one further to the back. And here they show you how they're cooling the rest of the motherboard and stuff like that. Which I guess you could also say like this almost like combines some of the static pressure. Maybe that helps too from how much is generated by each one. You could also do something very creative. Like you could use two of those or something like that, and then have a very small fan on the other side that actually helps you generate a lot of the static pressure that benefits these coolers. So I believe that a fully custom redesigned laptop around these things would actually be very, very exciting.
Material shows coolers on different edges of the laptop. But I look at this tech and I'm just super excited to see what other companies do with this technology. Like I think if I had to bet, I feel like this changes the trajectory of laptops. I really think that this type of tech is, like, it feels tangible. It's real. Like, it already is tangible. Like I saw one, but it just feels proper. It doesn't feel like vaporware. Like, I'm not saying that Frore was vaporware. I feel like they had good intentions, but just like the technology and the physics behind it,
yeah,
you hit a wall.
You almost wonder, like with some of that other technology, if it's cool tech that is actually usable, but maybe it just was like targeting the entirely wrong market, right? That happens. Sometimes you're just too narrow-minded. You're looking at like at PCs and smartphones because that's cool, and maybe you're like PC enthusiast yourself and you're coming in and you want to like design solutions for it, but maybe accidentally you design a cooling solution that is super perfect for something entirely different, right? That happens by accident. A lot of great tech, a lot of great medicine has been discovered. So while this does seem a little bit more purpose built for specifically for like PC hardware. Now with the current size of all of that tech and the fact that it's still like relatively inefficient in comparison to a fan, I wouldn't expect it to be built into like a smartphone or even a thin tablet, but I could see that it being maybe like a killer accessory. Like imagine like a MagSafe battery sized puck. When you actually look at it, how large is like a MagSafe battery? Right? So imagine this, but instead of this being like focused on the battery, let's say it has a bit of internal battery to compensate for the power consumption. It can do a lot with little static pressure for the simple reason that obviously all parts are very close together. And if Apple even manages to at some point put the A series chip really close to that center, right? Now you could have a solution that is very much focused on, let's say, like just sustained performance. Could be like a gaming accessory. Could have like, I don't know, like 2 input buttons or something like that as well, like what we've seen with some of the gaming phones. But yeah, I could definitely see how this could work in several different products.
Energy you can't beat physics. But here, the physics, they already work. So, all right, there you have it. I hope you guys look at this and don't think I'm crazy. Like, I'm so excited by this.
No, I think it's actually pretty exciting. I do appreciate his enthusiasm. What have been some of his more recent videos actually? Here, OnePlus 13 ROG Phone Pro, crazy battery life, the M4 Mac Mini, the M4 MacBook Pro, that tiny Apple phone thing where you can put the Apple Watch inside. He still does some really good content. Maybe I should have like checked this out. Like he does pretty short, pretty like focused videos. Like he's basically giving impressions of 2 phones, and this is a less than 6-minute video. And the M4 MacBook Pro review is like a 6-minute video. The M4 Mac Mini review a 10-minute video. So definitely like this is like I believe LTT's video just for the M4 Mac Mini is like 17 minutes or something like that. But I'm definitely not going to be watching LTT today because I am happy to be finishing up. We've definitely had interesting things to cover, and thank you to Tipo Master for suggesting for a video for us to watch. We've covered an array of news focused on everything from Apple augmented reality glasses and how they are not happening anytime soon, how pretty soon we're getting a 2nd generation of AirTags with highly improved precision finding capabilities, how by 2028 or maybe some other point in the future, Apple could target a very ambitious high-end Mac iPad foldable hybrid. And we have talked about how Apple could finally solve some of the most long-standing, most annoying issues that are associated with the Magic Mouse, putting the USB-C port on the front, making it more ergonomic, maybe giving it more buttons and stuff like that. And yeah, so there's a lot of stuff to talk about, as you can see, every week, even right before Christmas, right before New Year's Eve. So I'm very grateful for anyone who tuned in. Of course, thank you for commenting. Now we're almost 2 hours into the stream as we're wrapping up. So last shout out to the YouTube Jazz, subscribing, liking, sharing, commenting, leaving super chats and super stickers if you want to support us here directly, becoming a channel member, becoming a supporter over on Patreon, all that fun stuff. But of course, just watching these videos, just hitting the like button is already very much appreciated. And follow me on Twitter to have more in-depth, more direct tech discussions, some political discussions with me if you feel like it. Yeah, that's about it for today. Let me briefly maybe check if there's any last um, things. So this is Mac rumors catching up to 9 to 5 Mac, and 9 to 5 Mac, I assume, also is finally hitting its deserved weekend. Yeah, so that's all the things we covered. Thank you again to 9 to 5 Mac for actually aggregating Bloomberg's Mark Gurman's Power newsletter very quickly for us to react to it. As always, guys, let me know what you would like to see me cover next. I'll see you next time. This is Mark Tag, tuning out.